Hey, welcome to Youth Worker on Fire. Today we have a special guest, Michael Geoffrion, who is a history teacher, and he is Teacher of the Year last year, 2015-16, and he is also a podcaster. So you're going to want to see this episode. Mr. Geoffrion, this is Youth Worker on Fire.
Okay.
I'm Doug Edwards, and it's really great to have you.
Well, thank you for having me, Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. And your intern's off out of sight, Natalie, from Florida State University, and good to have you, Natalie. Glad you're here. And we got Gabby and David, too, filming us. So you guys are the best. Thanks. These guys always make me, well, they can't make me look good, but they make the whole program look good. And so tell me about your main influences. This is all about helping other people do what you do. And so tell us about the people that influenced you in your life, middle school, high school, college. In all those three areas, who is the person that just stands out, whether it's a teacher, coach, whatever?
For me, when I was in high school, that's really where most of my influences, I think, come from as far as my inspiration to become an educator. My greatest influence, I think, would be Mr. Bill Gladio, who was my U.S. history teacher when I was a junior at Robert S. Rogers High School in Toledo, Ohio. And he was just a wild man. Mm-hmm. He obviously had so much fun doing his job, and he inspired a love of history in his students. And that kind of motivated me to do what I do. Now, do I do it the same way he does? I don't do it the exact same way because I've had other inspirations. I frequently tell many of my students that the most important classes that I took in high school were drama 1, 2, 3, and 4, because those are the things I use every single day.
Absolutely.
I'm performing
yes.
every single day, and I've been working on this teacher character for about 10 years now, and I've just about got it where I want it to be.
And see, and that's a great thing because, you know, for students, they deserve the best. And obviously you believe that, and you want to be the best. And so there is working on a character. Disney works on characters. Yeah. Seems to work well for them.
Yeah. And by the way, I mentioned Mr. Gladio. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention Miss Anita Scaff, who was my drama teacher and head of our theater department and everything.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And those are the types of people that do influence us, and there's a light bulb that comes on somewhere along the way. So how did you get into teaching itself, though? I mean, were those the guys that you knew before you went to college that you're going to be a teacher?
No. My major when I first started at college was actually computer programming.
Yeah?
And it was that process of sitting in front of a computer, typing out algebraic equations and not talking to anybody for hours on end that kind of motivated me to change my major. And people had told me that I should go into education. My mother told me many times when I was a senior in high school and even a junior in high school that I should probably teach history. And I ignored her for a very long time. I was trying to, you know, make that money. I was seeing dollar signs, and I was going after the computer programming degree, and ultimately I ended up changing my mind and really have never regretted it since.
And that's that happens a lot of times. And I tell students, tell my own children that you know, go after the degree you want, but if you have to change, change. Yeah. And if you get out of college with a degree and that's not what you want to do, that's okay. It's not wasted education. And so it's really great that. So when did you switch, though? Maybe I missed that. When did you switch?
I switched right after my first year of college. So I was a freshman as a computer programming major, and then I changed into secondary education. Okay.
And I'm thinking that you are a left-right brain person. The reason I say that is that I'm really right-brained. I'm pretty much art all the way, and I've had to do some left-brain things. It really hurts my brain. But I know several people that are very successful, like yourself, that are left and right brain, because you obviously have that creative side, which is the drama, and then you also have the side that is very technical, very organizational, which is the computer and crunching numbers, that sort of thing.
Almost every exam that I've ever taken to determine left-right brain is pretty much down the center.
Down the middle,
Yeah.
absolutely. That makes you a great weapon for education to use and to help students. And whether you went into business or whether you stayed in education, you nailed it, brain-wise anyway. So tell me about your podcast, though. Why did you create this podcast?
Well, a few years ago, there was a major push to get more kids into AP classes, so I was getting more and more what I would call non-traditional AP kids. It wasn't necessarily the kids that come to you already with the skills and all you're doing is giving them a little bit of content and they're fine. My class was largely a skills-based class, and sometimes I was getting kids that didn't necessarily have the college reading level that's necessary to read an extremely dry textbook and actually get something out of it. So I started creating supplemental materials, and the first thing was my website, mrgeoffrion.com, and that had everything from chapter summaries and a variety of note-taking templates and things of that nature. And ultimately, when I was going from having 50 kids in AP World History to 120-something kids in AP World History, it's like, well, I need another plan here. And so with the podcast, the idea was I'm not really lecturing in class. The conduit for content knowledge is always the textbook for the most part, and then I'm teaching them what to do with that content after the fact. And if it's difficult for them to sort of get that information from the reading, I have to give them other avenues, even if it's just building background knowledge to help them through the reading that I expect of them. So the podcast ended up being a kind of my go-to thing. Most of my ideas come to me when I'm driving to or driving from work. I have a 30-minute drive.
Yes.
So I'm listening to podcasts. So I'm like, wait a minute, I could do this.
Yes.
And so I decided to do it. I recorded 38 of them that correspond with the chapters of my textbook, and I've recorded, I think, 5 or 6 special episodes where I speak with former students that have already been through the class, some of them after their first semester of college even, to sort of talk about the relationship between their taking an AP class and their college experience. And at this point, every time a new one comes up in iTunes for my students, it says rebroadcast, episode 6.
That's great. That's great. And they're engaged in that because that's their world.
Yeah.
How easy is it to do a podcast once you get it started?
As long as you can record an audio file, you can make a podcast. That's pretty much what it comes down to. I did mine on the cheap. I recorded mine on my iPhone.
Perfect.
I found somebody, an artist on SoundCloud that was perfectly happy to let people use his music for free as long as they gave him credit for it. So I had my intro music and my end credit music on that. And I edited it with Audacity, a free audio creator.
Audacity is a very good program, yeah.
I spent no money making my podcast.
So for you teachers, you can do it for no money, okay? and it's worth it. You had 3,000 hits on one of those, is my understanding. Is that right?
Probably. I don't really pay attention to the numbers.
Well, somebody paid attention because Mrs. Velez said you had 3,000.
Yeah.
So you know that one of them was a bigger hit than some of the others, though, right?
Yeah, probably. A lot of times.
Tell me why. Do you remember what that particular segment may have been?
It most likely was one of the special episodes of former students that I interviewed during Thanksgiving break after their first semester, just about after their first semester at FSU and at University of Tampa. Yeah. And I think I had one kid from Florida, or from University of Florida there, from UF there as well. Yeah. And it was just talking about how AP classes, and maybe in particular my class, may have helped and influenced them as far as their college experience has gone.
That's great. And students influence students. They love to listen to each other. It's near that age group, that age gap. There's no gap.
Yeah. I can tell them something a million times. They may not listen to me. But sometimes if they hear from somebody their age or somebody just slightly older that, look, I did this and it worked for me. Yes. Then they might buy into it.
Absolutely. Now tell me why. Now history, you had a history professor. Tell me why do you love history?
I'd say so.
Yeah? Tell me why you love it so much.
I once had a college professor at a 400 level history class that was about American Frontier Society, and the entire thing was basically building up to a 20-page research paper. And one of the things he said that stuck with me to this day is history is the best avenue for understanding the human experience. We study people. That's pretty much what it comes down to, the human experience. Not every human's experience, because we don't have every human's experience available to us, but as many as we can to try to synthesize some sort of narrative. The other thing about history is simply because of that, because of it's based on human experiences. I mean, smart people learn from their experiences. People who are even smarter learn from the experiences of others. So history is this laboratory where we test the consequence of human thought and action so that we can inform how we are going to respond in various situations. You know, the whole, if we don't learn from our history, we're doomed to repeat it type of scenario that's often repeated.
Yes, and most people don't learn from their own from history.
The lesson we learn is that we do not learn.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The ones who do, they benefit from it. And well, that's great. I love that you've shared with us and done these things. Is there anything you want to say to people that are wondering what they need to do? They're already in college, like Natalie, who's here. She's going that education route. But maybe there's some people who are going to see this podcast that are in college, but they're just not sure what they're going to do. Why would you suggest that they go into education? Or how do you think they should, what's their guideline to find out if that's what they're meant to do?
I have to be frank here. If a person would be happier or just as happy doing anything other than education, they should probably do that.
Okay.
This is often described as the toughest job you'll ever love. You're working many hours unpaid, after hours, on breaks, on vacations. You're, doing all sorts of, you're putting in the hours. Now, if it's not something you love, you're going to feel those hours. If it is something you love, it basically becomes a hobby. I went to a training at UCF a few years ago, and I ran into a former student. He says, well, what are you doing? Are you working on some grad work? And I said, no, I'm just attending a training about a class I don't even teach. He says, well, you need to find a hobby. I said, I think this might be my hobby.
Well, and Edison was known to sleep in his laboratory.
Yeah.
Because he loved creating so much, inventing so much, that he spent most of his life there.
Yeah.
And his family would come visit him there sometimes. And so sometimes your hobby, if you're able to make a living from your hobby, what better thing to do?
Oh, absolutely.
It's your passion.
Work your passion and you'll never work a day in your life.
That's it. Well, I appreciate you coming so much. And what's the name of your podcast again?
It's Mr. Geoffrion's World History podcast, available on iTunes. Currently, I'm building Mr. Geoffrion's AP World History channel on YouTube. I only have a couple videos on there, but in the coming weeks, I'll have a lot more.
Mr. Geoffrion, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Doug.
All right. We're out.